One of the shifts that I think we've all seen with the next generation coming through is that money isn't everything.
We've seen the desire to communicate what's important for them and making choices of where they work and how they work.
The energy resources and industrials industry is critical to the decarbonization journey. And so this industry is absolutely core to that purpose.
100%. It's their chance to write the future. Hi, I'm Jodi Calamai, Managing Partner, Human Capital.
I'm Andrew Swart, and I'm the Industry Managing Partner for Energy, Resources and Industrials at Deloitte.
We're here today to explore the intersection between Canada's race to net zero emissions, its overlap with talent transformation, and maybe even find a new dimension to global disruption.
Hi, Jodi.
Hi, Andrew.
How are you doing?
I'm good. Yourself?
Great. So, first question for you is, how has working in Canada changed since 2020?
Wow.
All right, love it. Tell me more.
Yeah, when I think about who does the work, where work is done from, what constitutes the work, I mean, it's all really evolved. But a couple of principal points really stick out for me. First is, who our workforce is. Since the year 2000, we've had boomers, our largest generation in the workforce, declining. But we saw tremendous exodus of that cohort from the workforce in 2020 and since then. The second point really looks at the skills required to do the work. Since 2020, we've seen an emerging requirement for technical skills, new digital fluency, even human skills, things like communication, cooperation, ideation. And then the third point for me really gets at worker preferences. Since 2020, the pandemic, the shift we've all experienced, we've seen an evolving requirement essentially for purpose, for meaning at the center of workers' days, but also the desire to communicate what's important for them and making choices of where they work and how they work.
What is interesting about what you've just said is that, one of the shifts that I think we've all seen with the next generation coming through is that money isn't everything. And so it kind of goes to, what's the purpose that I have?
Absolutely.
And when you think about, and maybe this goes to the narrative around the opportunity, is that the energy resources and industrials industry is critical to the decarbonization journey. Not just in terms of decarbonizing and taking out emissions on the one hand, but also about actually supplying the critical minerals that are essential to the energy transition, being able to provide the grid infrastructure that is going to allow us to decarbonize and create the next generation of energy systems. And so this industry is absolutely core to that purpose, if you want to put it. And I think that's a bit of the hook for that next generation of talent that has to be told.
100%. It's their chance to write the future.
And so when you look ahead to 2030, what changes do you expect?
The pessimistic view is this changing requirement for work really evolves and dramatically depletes our labor supply. So, with new requirements of skills and a smaller labor pool to draw from, there's a view where we just don't have the people we need with the skills we need in order to execute. And the impact that would be really on Canada's competitiveness. But from a positive view, I actually think we have the most optimistic opportunity available for us in Canada. If we can get a handle of the workers we need, if we give them the skills required, if we create rules and opportunities for them to drive impact, collaborate differently, I think we'll be sitting in a world of 2030 where there will be such innovation coming out of this country, no one will recognize us.
I love this sort of feeling of abundance or potential abundance that's out there. I mean, it's interesting about the talent shortages because in my world of energy resources and industrials, that's the thing I repeatedly hear from clients, which is in order for us to realize this growth potential that we have in this country, we need the talent and we're not seeing the talent coming through. And so we need to think about this in a different way.
Andrew, I'm dying to know, if you could choose one thing to disrupt about the industry you work in, what would it be?
It's got to be access. And I say access really from a point of view of education, right? So I think, how do we bring people onto the workforce and give them the opportunities, give them the access to this education, but it has to be different to the way that we've thought about education in the past, right? So the traditional model very often in the industry is you put people through these 4-year degrees, and you know somebody pops out the other end, and sometimes they stay in the industry and sometimes they don't. But for us to be really successful, I think we've got to explore things like micro-credentialing. We've got to find ways to really amp up co-ops and internships and those sort of areas. But for a lot of people, access may even start earlier to education because, again, within the world of energy resources and industrials, a lot of children coming through the education system, starting at kind of high school, may not think about ER&I as the destination. And the other sort of aspect to that as well is there's huge untapped opportunity within our Indigenous communities across the country. Probably the fastest growing labor segment in Canada. And so, on the one hand, one may look abroad, one may look at bringing in talent from other countries, but how do we also look at the talent that's sitting on our doorstep and how to develop, nurture, and again, provide access to that education?
I'm glad you went there, because if you look at the stats around diversity, equity, and inclusion, we're actually starting to reverse the trend a little bit in energy transition and race to net zero, where we actually have, with all the knowledge we have around diverse and inclusive workforces, we have a chance to do it right. So what would an equitable and inclusive sector for the transition look like? What would be the makeup of labor within it? And then how do we tap into those with incentives in order to gain hold of it? So starting early, right? If we plan for it up front, we set targets and we create relationships, I truly believe we'll be the leading edge sector for a balanced, equitable workforce in this space.
How has the labor market changed? Like, you highlighted the boomers sort of retiring and how we're going to lose that intellectual property, that experience. But overall, what other dynamics are you seeing in the labor market?
Big shifts. Overall, I define the shift as a shift from an employer's market to a worker's market, and not necessarily for the reasons that we typically assume. Number one is really with skills at the center. So 74% of Canadian organizations speak to their inability to hire for the right talent that they need, 74%.
As you think about companies in particular, is there perhaps a mindset today that those companies look in their traditional labor pools for skills as opposed to looking in at other industries or adjacent industries?
100%. The mindset I would start with is, if my workforce has potential, the opportunities are endless. So if I look across my people today and they have an aspiration to do better, to continuously learn, to collaborate in untraditional ways, how do I equip them with the knowledge they need, hold my leaders accountable for driving that skill set, and stop thinking that learning is something that happens in a classroom, but actually something that happens every single day on the job.
I remember hearing a great story that one of our partners told me around a mining company that was actually looking to get people in one of their control rooms who would basically be able to dispatch big haul trucks on a mine site. And they couldn't find people within the mining environment that did that. But they looked at an adjacent industry. They looked at people who used to dispatch ambulances. And they're like, that's a very transferable skill. If I could bring that into mining, I've actually solved a big portion of my problem. But it's a little bit of that mind shift change that needs to happen.
Why couldn't mining look at untraditional sources to do exactly the same thing, but in relevant construct with their workforce, with their industry that they exist in?
How is heightened competition for skills workers with countries like the US impacting the availability of talent for Canada's net zero transition?
Oh, what a good question. I just gave you a big yes. The reality is we're not the only country in the world competing for the same talent with the same global challenges around us. So of course, the US or other countries around the world are competing for the exact same challenge, sitting on the exact same labor reality that we are as well. I think last thing I heard, they were looking for over 500,000 workers to help them with their net zero challenge. And they were looking to source that talent from anywhere available. Well, guess what the next closest country is? So that is a huge challenge for us.
Jodi, What tools can Canadian businesses use to upskill their workforces for the net zero transition?
Okay. For me, tool number one is really workforce planning. What skills do you have today? What skills do you need in the future? How many of those? Data becomes priority number 1, 2, and 3 as we embark on this journey. And I believe the winners and the losers will be defined on their ability to actually have the information of the shifts they need to make. So it gets to tool number 2 is partnerships. Partnership with education, partnership with other academic retooling and reskilling institutions. The one we haven't yet talked about is partnership with government. How is the government creating incentives for skilled labor to come to Canada to help with this gap? And then tool number 3 would see us getting to the core of this purpose. How are we using the tools around effective communication, and rewriting the narrative about what a career in these spaces holds and how that could be the unlock for all these workers in different sectors and different industries around the world or around the country looking for something different. So I think we can get to this answer in a very untraditional way.
So is the word on your board PPP? Like 3 Ps?
It might just be. You want to see it?
Yeah,
all right. I gave you a smiley face there too.
Face. Thanks so much for joining us, and hopefully we've helped you discover a new dimension to global disruption. If Canada's going to be a world leader in talent transformation and the race to net zero emissions, first we need to reckon with the intersection between them. The bright side, we have everything we need to get us over the finish line.